Hi everybody, it's Aluna Michaels, Esoteric Astrologer. How are you doing? Today we're going to talk about transits of Jupiter from a more esoteric perspective. Also, we're going to cover a little bit of the mundane so you understand about it if you don't know too much about astrology. So Jupiter has a 12-year orbit, so it goes through all the 12 signs in a year, so it would be in a sign for a month. It'd be in a sign for a whole year. And so Jupiter transits can happen fairly quickly. When they work with you, they might just be a few weeks. But then when you deal with the retrograde of Jupiter, you can have one pass, and then it retrogrades and you get a second pass, and then it's going forward again, you get a third pass. And that period of time would be more building upon each piece. And so let's just talk about the energy of Jupiter. Of course, I always talk about how Jupiter has so many moons that we seem to be always discovering new moons of Jupiter. There's different ones all the time coming. And Jupiter's kind of this collective energy. It's definitely a planet of good karma, of happiness, of fulfillment. That idea of all the moons is like collective energy. You tend to meet more people or have more fun or feel more group oriented. It's a planet of abundance. So that could be emotionally feeling happy, making more money, having more people around you, that sort of thing. But Jupiter isn't all perfect stuff and happy stuff. Sometimes Jupiter magnifies things. It's a very expansive energy, just like it's kind of like a mini sun, and it's very gaseous and stuff in the astronomical thinking about Jupiter. So when we think about Jupiter in astrology, it expands things. So sometimes if you're having a square from Jupiter or even, an opposition or sometimes a conjunction, it can blow things out of proportion. So you might have to watch for being over dramatic or over worried. I mean, if you have an angle in your chart, like let's say for instance, you have Mercury conjunct Saturn. So you're thinking Mercury, you're Saturn, you can tend to have sad thinking and, Well, when Jupiter comes, especially as it works with you those 3 times, it can exacerbate the problem and make you so sick of it you want to be done with it. And that can be a weird part of Jupiter, as you think, I'm going to be so happy, or I'm going to have all these good things. Well, ultimately, it does want you to be happy, but Jupiter is also a planet of liberation. So it wants to free you from whatever is keeping you from being happy. So for instance, if you've got this Mercury conjunct Saturn, let's say that could be just general negative thinking. And Jupiter's going to challenge you to say, what do we got to move out of the way? Are there hurtful experiences as a child or negative people around you or, just tackling your own thinking? So Jupiter wants to free you from that problem. And over the years, I've come to see that Jupiter is always, and of course, all planets are trying to help us grow, but the Jupiter is always is always trying to bless you. So especially find with relationship things with Jupiter or a job thing, you think, I know some people have had Jupiter transits and say, I'm going to get engaged, or, I'm going to get a promotion at my job. And then Jupiter comes and it's like, the person broke up with me, or I got fired. And other people in your life will probably say, phew, that's good. You were burdened by that person in that relationship. You were burdened by that job. And Jupiter's saying, you're free. But unfortunately, your personality is attached. You think, no, Jupiter took it away. Well, usually by the end of those transits, or when another major planet would transit that same part of your chart, it's like, oh, wow, I was going to be with an abusive person and be in a marriage. And now I met this new person and it's great. Or, likewise with a job. So I always try to think Jupiter is blessing us. Excuse me. Here's another thing I want to talk about with retrograde Jupiter and stationary Jupiter. Stationary is when it's slowing down to turn retrograde or slowing down to turn direct again. And this can also happen before you have a Jupiter transit. Like let's say you're about to have your Jupiter return, which would happen every 12 years when you're 12, 24, 36, 48, whatever. Or say Jupiter's going to conjunct your moon. Sometimes even Jupiter in your 12th house before it hits the ascendant. there can be this darkness before the dawn kind of feeling with Jupiter, and I'm always surprised about that. I think like, why aren't they happy or they don't have a Jupiter transit? With my clients, I think, oh, there's that feeling that you are ending a cycle of fulfillment with Jupiter. And you've grown, especially if it's a 12-year cycle. Let's say Jupiter is going to come through your 12th house and go into your ascendant, into your first house. It would, sometimes it makes you feel sort of stale about things that used to excite you, because it's time to grow. You've fulfilled these desires, they've come to their fruition, and it's kind of like fruit rotting on the vine, or the fruit that fell off the tree and it's sitting there and it's gross, It's just not fun anymore. It's not luscious anymore. It's just, you've squeezed all the joy you can out of that. So sometimes people feel kind of this existential kind of emptiness or a sense of loneliness, and again, this darkness before the dawn. Then Jupiter comes, over the ascendant or conjuncts that planet, or, goes past your own Jupiter, and it's like a brand new thing, brand new perspective. So it's almost like you're finishing karma about something your soul desired to experience, or again, it's like a field of study, a certain type of thinking that just needs to be refreshed, and Jupiter will bring that refreshment. And here's this book here, if you're going to read it, be ready for it. It's Esoteric Astrology by Alice Bailey. It is very thick and intense. It's just not like normal reading. You got to really weed stuff out. But years ago, I went through the book and put through like things they said about Jupiter, and so that made it easy for me to talk to you about this. But one of the things she says here, page 126, and this was, well, actually, I'm going to 171 because it relates to what I was just talking about. She says, Jupiter in its lower aspect gives the fulfillment of desire and satisfied demand, while in its highest aspect, Jupiter is the outgoing expression of love, which magnetically attracts to itself that which is desired, this time for the good of the whole. So that idea of desire, and when you're on a spiritual path, is it a lower desire? Like that's where especially you can have that blasé, third dimensional blasé thing about Jupiter. This relationship wasn't all it's cracked up to be, or I don't know if I, feel happy in general about life. And because Jupiter has fulfilled the desire, and then you feel kind of like spent about it, and then you create a new desire and a new goal, and to be fair, Jupiter definitely is about a horizon, a new thing to conquer. You think of Sagittarius, the mundane ruler of Jupiter. You can also say Pisces too, but let's just say Sagittarius to keep it simple. That it's like that on the hunt for something new, and that new concept that inspires you. So yeah, there is that, and that can be a spiritual component too. But that idea of like, is your desire just for yourself, or is it for others? And that's the thing when you are on a spiritual path and you get into that deeper side of Jupiter, that it's kind of like, what am I doing with my life? Is it meaningful? Is it meaningful on a larger scale, or am I just like doing stuff? Am I just doing karma? Am I just, one desire leads to another? Or is it that sense that I'm actually reading this book by Meher Baba called God Speaks, and he talks about the disgust of existence or the disgust of reincarnation, like when you feel like I'm doing it over and over, and kind of like Sisyphus, I live one life and I die and I'm back again, and more desires and more karma, and this feeling of disgust, like, ugh, I want it to change. Jupiter can also be that sense of spiritual malaise, that then, there's this new way to look at things, that I'm living my life from this spiritual dimension. How is my karma, how am I sort of erasing karma rather than creating a new piece of karma, getting out of one and moving into another? How am I healing it? How am I working with forgiveness? How am I dedicating some time to my spiritual growth? So there's that other sense of inner blah that the pre-Jupiter could give you on a more spiritual level. So in a way, every Jupiter transit is giving you that opportunity to say, what is this desire for? And there was another thing I read in that God Speaks, where Meher Baba was talking about a disciple who was like, I want enlightenment, it's bugging the master, and how am I going to reach enlightenment, and am I ready for enlightenment? And they said they were bathing in the river, and the master held the disciple's head under the water till he almost drowned, and then lifts him up, and he says, now what was the thing you most thought about and most desired when you're under the water? And the disciple says, air. And the master says, when you desire to know God, to know your soul that bad, like you wanted the air, then you'll be freed from karma and God realized. So that idea of maybe Jupiter raising your desires to that higher and higher level instead of just regular old stuff. And again, to watch with Jupiter with this expansion of consciousness. It can be a little overwhelming at first too, because you're in a whole new consciousness. And sort of dedicating, what is this? You can take that new energy you have in your mind, and you have that choice to kind of play it out regular or lift it to a higher level, dedicate it to a higher purpose. Like say it's a new relationship. There's nothing wrong with having that relationship and that excitement, or you're going to school, some of the other things Jupiter can bring you. But how are you using that to connect with that person's soul if it's a relationship? How is this helping you in your evolution? Not that you don't want to do those regular things, but how are you perceiving it differently and consciously thinking of your spiritual growth? So that helps Jupiter to give you more energy, to lift, again, just have more impact on you instead of just, oh, there was a Jupiter transit, there it went. Because sometimes it can make you complacent, and you can waste Jupiter transits because they can feel easy sometimes when you have the good ones that are just fun. So that's another challenge, is even when you're having a good time, and how do I make this purposeful, And in a way, that has a lot to do with Sagittarius. There's that fun, goofy side of Sag, and then there's that deep spiritual student questing for truth, So Jupiter will take you wherever you are, it'll meet you where you're at. So to raise the stakes, and then Jupiter can meet you with those higher stakes, that's always a good thing. So that is that idea of, I love, again, this quote, that Jupiter in its lower aspect gives the fulfillment of desire and satisfied demand, like, I want to creatively visualize things, or like Jupiter will give you that, definitely. But in its higher aspect, it's the outgoing expression of love which magnetically attracts to itself, which really the soul desires for the good of the whole. So you still end up happy, but it's in a more deeper happiness instead of just, I got an immediate need met. And then, of course, other people are being blessed when you're in that higher sense of self. Here's another one that I want to read you about Jupiter. That Jupiter is about the connecting the head and the heart, the mind and love, of will and wisdom. That Jupiter works to, Esoteric Astrology says, bring them into synthetic interplay, because Jupiter's about that idea of blending the opposites and blending all pieces into one. So that's also something, that sense of integration. And that leads me to something else to say with Jupiter. When you've had really hard transits, like let's say you had, say, when I go back to this Mercury conjunct Saturn thing in your chart, and you've had Pluto go over that. Like say you've got Mercury conjunct Saturn in Capricorn. Call for a reading if you have that. No, I'm kidding. That's a hard one. But, I'm joking, but if someone has it out there, it really is to deal with a sense of negativity or inferiority in this lifetime to overcome that. And then Pluto, let's say, goes by that Mercury and Saturn, and just, whoa, it's this intense experience of whatever goes on with you. And then that when Jupiter comes past, and you've had a really hard transit, hard Uranus transit, or even a Saturn thing, Jupiter can come and help you see why you went through it. And it helps to give you this spiritual perspective of, oh, I needed that lesson. Or, wow, when Pluto conjuncted my Mercury and Saturn, I had an enormous fight with my sibling or something, because Mercury can represent that. But then Jupiter says, wow, it taught me to have this bottom line with that person, because my sibling was abusive to me, or whatever. Or I really stood up to that negative thinking, and I'm really much stronger. So Jupiter will give you the why you went through it. So that's very helpful. It wants to soothe you and give you that spiritual vision as to why. Because, you can have that, why me, God? And Jupiter says, this is why. This is why we worked with you this way. That's the spiritual energy saying that. So, people always joke, my clients always joke with Jupiter, you can gain weight, because it's expansive, but it is about expansion. Sometimes your body expands, but, you can get pregnant under that, or even if you're a man, have a partner who becomes pregnant, your wallet can expand. It's all that sense of expansion. But no matter what, it's like, how am I, maybe, and this is something to put out too. There's a wonderful book, and I don't have it at hand. I think it's called Jupiter and Weight Control, Beverly Flynn. And she talks about when you gain a lot of weight under Jupiter and you don't want to, like, you need to expand. And if you won't expand in your life in another way, you'll do it in a real basic way of getting heavier physically. And so when you're gaining weight under Jupiter, it's like, where am I not allowing Jupiter to expand me conceptually, creatively, my career, spiritually, whatever. So that's something to think about. But mostly, your Jupiter transits are going to be fun. But, again, watching for those stationary points or the point before it hits the planet, and to think, what do I need to release to bring more in? I'm letting stuff go. Jupiter wants to clear out the old, make a vacuum, and then get that new prosperity of emotion, money, relationship. So don't be afraid to release stuff before you have a Jupiter transit, so you can take in more good stuff that's for your evolution right now, and get rid of the old. And and again, if you're interested in a session, you can go on my website, alunamichaels.com. My phone number's there. You can send me an email. You can contact me through YouTube. And I hope you're enjoying your life and your spiritual journey.